Close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the exact smell of a cold winter evening when you were a child. Was it the sharp sulfur scent of burning coal briquettes? Or perhaps the sweet caramelized aroma of roasted sweet potatoes drifting down a freezing street? Welcome back, my old friend. Today we are going to take a journey back in time, back to the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. We are going to explore 20 forgotten winter rituals from our youth in China. These were the things we did to survive the bitter cold, but looking back, they were the very things that brought us together. I want you to stay with me until the very end, because the last ritual we will talk about is a testament to the immense, silent sacrifices our mothers made for us, a memory that will surely warm your heart. Before we begin our list, let us remember how time felt back then. Time moved slower. It was not rushed by the constant ringing of mobile phones or the endless stream of news. Winter meant a genuine slowing down of the world. Yes, life was undeniably harder. We did not have central heating in every room, and luxury was an unfamiliar concept. But there is a modern myth that without all this technology and wealth, we were somehow emotionally poorer. That could not be further from the truth. Because we had less, every small comfort meant more. The cold forced us to huddle closer, to rely on our neighbors, and to find absolute joy in the simplest of things. The warmth of a shared meal or a handmade garment held a kind of magic that money simply cannot buy today. Let us slowly unpack those magical memories, one by one. Let us begin with a sight that signaled the true arrival of winter in every neighborhood, the monumental task of storing winter cabbage. Long before the first snow fell, horse-drawn carts or heavy tricycles would roll into the streets, piled incredibly high with massive pale green and white heads of cabbage. It was an all-hands-on-deck situation for the entire family. We would spend hours carrying these heavy vegetables, stacking them meticulously against the walls of our courtyards or up the dark stairwells of apartment buildings. We would cover them with old, heavy quilts to protect them from the deepest frost. The air smelled of damp earth and crisp leaves. For the next several months, this cabbage would be our daily companion. We ate it in clear soups, stir-fried it with tiny scraps of pork if we were lucky, and chopped it finely for dumplings. As the winter dragged on, the outer leaves would turn a pale, translucent yellow. Storing the cabbage was not just a chore. It was our family's primary insurance policy against the cold, a towering wall of culinary security that told us we would not go hungry. Our second memory revolves around the very heart of the winter home, the honeycomb coal briquettes. For those of us who grew up in the city, the smell of coal smoke is forever woven into our childhood. Buying the coal was a heavy, dirty job. We would watch the old men with their soot-covered faces pedaling massive carts, burdened with hundreds of these black cylinders. Stacking them in the narrow hallways required precision, and our hands would be stained a deep black for days. But the true ritual was keeping the fire alive. You had to use a pair of long iron tongs to carefully lift a new briquette, perfectly aligning its holes with the glowing red holes of the briquette beneath it. If you misaligned them, the fire would suffocate and die, leaving the house freezing. Waking up in the middle of a freezing night to check the stove, smelling that faint, sharp tang of sulfur, and seeing the comforting orange glow in the dark room was a ritual of survival. It was a daily, careful dance with fire that kept the winter chill at bay. Now let us remember the weight of true warmth. The handmade cotton-padded jackets. In those days, we did not have featherlight down jackets or synthetic thermal wear. We had pure, dense cotton. The making of these jackets was a profound act of maternal love. I can still picture mothers and grandmothers sitting under the dim, yellow glow of a low-wattage light bulb, stitching the thick, unyielding fabric deep into the night. When you put one on, it was incredibly heavy, pressing down on your shoulders, making us all look like little round bears waddling clumsily through the snow. On bright winter days, a beautiful ritual took place in every courtyard. We would drape these heavy jackets and our thick quilts over bamboo poles to soak up the sun. We would use wooden sticks or woven bamboo beaters to smack the fabric, fluffing up the flattened cotton inside. The sound of that beating echoed through the alleys. When you wore the jacket that evening, it carried a distinct, beautiful fragrance, the smell of baked sunshine and a mother's endless dedication. As we walked home from school, battling the howling winter wind that felt like tiny knives on our cheeks, our salvation would often appear on a street corner. The fourth ritual is the irresistible allure of the roasted sweet potato vendor. They always stood behind a large, rusted iron oil drum that had been converted into a makeshift oven. The thick, caramelized, smoky sweetness of the roasting potatoes would drift for blocks, pulling us in like a magnet. We would pool our meager pocket money, handing over a few small coins in exchange for a piece of heaven. The vendor would hand you a scorching hot, blackened potato. The ritual was to toss it quickly from one bare hand to the other, using it as a temporary heater for your frozen fingers. When you finally split it open, the golden, steaming flesh inside was incredibly sweet, a stark contrast to the bitter, cold air. Eating it slowly, scraping every bit of sweetness from the charred skin, was the ultimate winter luxury of our youth. When night fell, the temperature inside our homes often plummeted nearly to freezing. This brings us to our fifth memory, the beloved hot water bottle. The ritual of preparing for bed was an elaborate process. First, water had to be boiled on the coal stove, a slow process that required patience. Then, taking the heavy metal thermos, we would carefully pour the boiling water into a brass container or a thick rubber bag. The smell of heated rubber is something I can still recall instantly. Because the surface was too hot to touch directly, the next step was crucial. We would wrap the bottle securely in an old soft towel or a sleeve cut from a discarded sweater. Slipping that warm, heavy package down to the very foot of the icy bed was a moment of pure relief. If you had siblings, there was always a silent nighttime battle, a tug-of-war under the heavy cotton quilts to see whose icy feet got to rest against that precious source of warmth, until the water eventually turned cold by morning. Our sixth memory is a testament to the frugality and creativity of the era, the unraveling and re-knitting of wool sweaters. Wool was incredibly precious, a rare commodity that was never, ever wasted. When a sweater became too small or the elbows wore completely through, it was not thrown away. Instead, a familiar winter scene would unfold. You would be asked to sit facing your mother, holding your arms out in front of you like a wooden frame. Your mother would carefully unravel the old sweater, pulling the yarn and wrapping it around your outstretched hands to form a loop. The unraveled yarn always looked crinkled, exactly like dry instant noodles. After washing the yarn and hanging it to dry to straighten it out, the rhythmic clicking of bamboo knitting needles would begin. That steady click-clack sound was the lullaby of our winters. From worn-out threads, a completely new garment would emerge, carrying the history of the old sweater and the warmth of the hands that remade it. For our seventh ritual, we step outside into the blinding glare of a sunny winter day to remember the pure joy of ice skating on frozen rivers and lakes. We did not have fancy indoor ice rinks with polished surfaces and loud music. We waited patiently for the deep freeze of midwinter, when places like the Shichahai Lakes in Beijing or the small local rivers in the north froze solid. Very few children had real factory-made ice skates. Most of us relied on homemade contraptions. We would strap small wooden boards, fitted with a piece of thick iron wire or a sharpened metal scrap, directly onto our thick cloth shoes. To move, we used 2 wooden sticks with nails driven into the ends, stabbing them into the ice to propel ourselves forward. The sound of rough metal scraping against uneven ice, the mist of our collective breath in the freezing air, and the uncontrollable laughter as we fell and tumbled over each other, provided a warmth that no fire could match. It was raw, unpolished, and completely exhilarating. Our 8th memory brings a burst of bright red color to the stark gray and white winter landscape, the candied hawthorn sticks. Hearing the vendor's call echoing down a quiet, snow-muffled street was enough to make any child stop in their tracks. The vendor would carry a thick straw pole hoisted on his shoulder, and sticking out of it in every direction were skewers of large, round hawthorn berries, coated in a gleaming, glass-like shell of hardened sugar syrup. The ritual of eating it was an experience of intense contrasts. First, the freezing cold, hard sugar would shatter and crunch loudly between your teeth. Immediately after, your mouth would be flooded with the sharp, acidic sourness of the soft berry inside, perfectly balanced by the sweetness of the syrup. It was not just a casual snack. It was a rare, vivid treat that tasted like the very essence of a childhood winter festival, a momentary escape from the repetitive daily meals. Before the era of tight, double-glazed windows, the freezing winter wind had a way of whistling right through the gaps in our wooden window frames. This necessitates our 9th memory, the annual ritual of pasting the windows. As late autumn turned to winter, every household would mix a simple, sticky paste out of cheap flour and boiling water. We would take old newspapers or cheap white paper and cut them into long, even strips. The whole family would work together, meticulously pasting these strips over every crack, joint, and crevice where the cold air might sneak in. It was a messy job, leaving dried white flakes of flour paste on our hands and clothes. Once the windows were completely sealed, the room instantly felt cozier, although a bit darker. On the windiest nights, you could hear the paper strips drumming lightly against the wood, a comforting acoustic reminder that, despite the roaring storm outside, your family had successfully built a warm, sealed fortress. The iron coal stove in the center of the room was our heater, our kitchen, and our gathering place. The 10th ritual is the simple pleasure of roasting snacks directly on its iron surface. In an era without microwaves or abundant snack foods, the stove provided its own magic. We would take plain, cold, steamed buns, slice them thickly, and place them right on the hot metal. We had to watch them like hawks, turning them at the exact right moment until the outside became a crispy, golden-brown shield, while the inside grew soft and steaming hot. Or we would arrange a handful of raw peanuts around the outer edge, where the heat was lower. We would sit in a circle, listening to the faint popping sounds as the peanuts roasted. Peeling the hot peanuts, blowing away the papery red skins which fluttered to the floor, and sharing these humble treats while chatting in the dim light, created an atmosphere of profound domestic peace that is hard to replicate today. As the deepest part of winter settled in, our minds would turn toward the approaching Lunar New Year, bringing us to the 11th ritual, the making of laba garlic. Usually on the 8th day of the 12th lunar month, the kitchen would become a hive of activity. Our small hands were put to work peeling dozens upon dozens of garlic cloves. The sharp, pungent smell would fill the house, and our fingernails would ache from the peeling. We would drop the pristine white cloves into empty glass jars and pour dark, sharp vinegar over them until they were submerged. The jar was tightly sealed and placed on the coldest window sill. Then, The waiting began. Every day we would check the jar, watching closely as a chemical magic took place. Slowly the garlic would begin to turn blue, and then a vibrant, beautiful emerald green. Opening that jar on New Year's Eve, the sharp vinegar smell hitting your nose, and eating that crisp green garlic with hot dumplings is a flavor profile that defines the Chinese winter. The 12th memory is one that appeals strongly to our sense of smell and touch, dealing with the inevitable chapped skin. The winter wind was absolutely merciless on our young, exposed faces. Almost every child walked around with bright red, cracked cheeks that felt as rough as coarse sandpaper. The remedy was a humble but magical product. Perhaps you remember the tiny, real clam shells filled with a thick, waxy ointment, or the iconic small metal tins of snowflake cream. The ritual was unavoidable. Before you left for school, your mother or grandmother would scoop out a generous dollop of the thick cream. With strong, uncompromising hands, she would vigorously rub it into your freezing face and the backs of your cracked hands. The rich, heavy, floral fragrance of that cream is unforgettable. It was greasy and uncomfortable at first, but it was a fragrant shield of protection, a tangible layer of a mother's care against the biting cruelty of the winter wind. Because most ordinary homes did not have hot running water or proper bathrooms, taking a bath was a major expedition. Our 13th memory is the weekly winter trip to the public bathhouse. Pushing past the heavy, damp cotton curtain at the entrance was like stepping into another world. You left the freezing gray streets and entered a cavernous room thick with hot, blinding white steam. The air echoed loudly with the splashing of water, the loud chatter of neighbors, and the rhythmic slapping sounds as men scrubbed their skin red with rough towels. It was intensely hot, loud, and communal. The best part of the ritual came after the scrubbing. Lying flat on the wooden resting beds, sipping hot, cheap tea, your body radiating heat. You felt so incredibly light, clean, and deeply warmed to your very bones that when you finally stepped back out into the freezing night, you felt invincible, floating all the way home through the falling snow. Entertainment was a rare and precious commodity, which brings us to our 14th winter memory, watching open-air movies in the freezing cold. You would think people would stay indoors during a winter freeze, but when word spread that a film was being projected in the village square or the factory courtyard, nobody stayed home. The ritual involved wearing every layer of clothing you owned and wrapping thick cotton quilts around your shoulders. We would carry our own small, rickety wooden stools and sit shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of others. The collective body heat helped, but we still stomped our feet relentlessly on the frozen ground to keep the blood flowing. Staring up at the harsh white beam of the projector piercing the snowy night sky, listening to the metallic clicking of the film reels, and sharing gasps and laughs with the whole community made the freezing temperatures completely irrelevant. We were captivated together. The 15th ritual is the crown jewel of winter culinary traditions, the family gathering to make dumplings. This was never a solo task. It was a loud, joyous symphony of cooperation. The ritual began with the heavy, rhythmic thud of a large meat cleaver against a thick wooden chopping block, as someone meticulously minced fatty pork and the winter cabbage we had stored months prior. The whole family would gather around a large table dusted heavily with white flour. Everyone had a specific role. One person was the master of the rolling pin, spinning small balls of dough into perfectly round, thin wrappers. The rest of us would scoop the fragrant filling, folding and pinching the edges to create rows of little crescent moons. There was always flour on our noses, endless teasing and storytelling, and finally, the comforting, thick cloud of steam rising from the boiling pot. Eating those dumplings, hot and bursting with juice, was the taste of family unity. For our 16th memory, we recall the rebellious, explosive joy of setting off firecrackers in the snow. During the winter festivals, the sharp smell of burnt gunpowder was everywhere, becoming the signature scent of the holidays. Because money was tight, we rarely lit an entire string of firecrackers at once. Instead, we would carefully untwist the braided fuse, separating them into individual pieces to make the fun last longer. The ritual involved lighting a single firecracker with a glowing stick of incense and tossing it into a deep snowbank. We would wait for the muffled thud and watch the white snow explode upward. By the next morning, the pure white landscape would be beautifully littered with shredded red paper. We children would spend hours walking through the snow, hunting for the unexploded duds, breaking them in half, and lighting the exposed silver powder directly for a final, brilliant flash of light. Our 17th ritual focuses on the traditional preservation of meat. In many regions, the arrival of consistently freezing weather was the signal to start making cured meats and sausages. The preparation was an art form, involving heavy amounts of soy sauce, salt, star anise, and sometimes the rich smoke of pine branches. Once prepared, strips of pork belly and long, beautiful strings of stuffed sausages were hung up outside. They dangled from apartment balconies, under the eaves of tile roofs, or on long bamboo poles stretching out from windows. Walking down the street, these hanging meats looked like deep red curtains of prosperity. The winter wind served as a natural refrigerator and dehydrator, slowly curing the meat to perfection. The daily ritual involved checking on them, turning them, and constantly shooing away opportunistic stray cats or birds, anticipating the rich, salty flavor they would bring to the New Year's dinner table. The 18th memory is perhaps the simplest, a testament to how we found joy in things that cost absolutely nothing. Before the days of ice cream shops on every corner, winter provided its own frozen treats, the giant icicles hanging from the eaves of roofs. After a sunny day melted the snow on the roof, the freezing night would create long, crystal-clear daggers of ice. As children, spotting a particularly long and thick icicle was a major victory. The ritual involved throwing snowballs at it, or finding a long wooden stick to carefully knock it loose without shattering it into pieces. Catching that heavy, cold shard of ice, wiping the dirt off on our sleeves, and sucking on it while walking to school was a pure delight. It tasted like nothing but cold, metallic winter air. Yet it was a badge of honor, a frozen treasure pulled directly from the edges of our homes. In the northern regions, surviving the winter meant going underground, bringing us to the 19th ritual, the winter vegetable cellar. The entrance was usually a heavy wooden trapdoor, located right in the courtyard. Opening it released a gust of air that smelled profoundly of damp earth and deep, ancient cold. Climbing down the rickety wooden ladder into the pitch-black cellar, armed only with a dim flashlight or a flickering candle, felt like an adventure every single time. Down there, the earth provided a stable temperature, preventing our precious supplies from freezing solid. The ritual was the careful management of food, digging through piles of dry sand to retrieve firm potatoes, crisp radishes, and bright carrots. We had to inspect them closely, removing any that showed signs of rot to protect the rest. It taught us a profound respect for food, understanding the deep, life-sustaining value of every single root we pulled from the dark earth. Our 20th and final winter ritual is one of profound sacrifice, a memory that often brings tears to our eyes when we realize what our mothers endured. The washing of heavy winter bedding. There were no washing machines. The heavy cotton quilts had to be unstitched, and the covers taken to a communal outdoor water tap or even a frozen river. Our mothers would literally have to smash a hole in the ice. The water was so violently cold it felt like 1,000 needles piercing the skin. We would watch them repeatedly plunge the heavy, soaking fabrics into the icy water, beating them fiercely with wooden mallets on the stone banks. Their bare hands would turn a painful purplish red, chapped and bleeding from the cold. When the washing was finally done, the heavy wet sheets were hung on outdoor lines, where the bitter wind would instantly freeze them stiff as cardboard. They would sway heavily in the wind, a silent, frozen monument to the boundless, enduring love of a mother, making sure her family slept in clean, warm beds. As we open our eyes and return to the present day, with our warm, centrally heated homes and our modern conveniences, it is easy to see how far we have come. But when we look back at these 20 forgotten rituals, we realize a profound truth. We do not actually miss the freezing bedrooms, the chapped skin, or the heavy labor. What we truly miss is the overwhelming sense of togetherness. We miss the feeling of sitting around a glowing coal stove, sharing a simple roasted sweet potato with people we loved more than anything. We miss a time when a mother's handmade jacket or a perfectly patched sweater made us feel like the richest children on earth. Now it is your turn to speak. Which of these 20 memories hit closest to home for you? Or what special winter ritual from your own childhood did I forget to mention? Please take a moment to write your story in the comments below. Let us build a warm fire of memories together. If this journey back in time brought a smile to your face, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to preserve our beautiful history. Until next time, stay warm and hold your memories close.